Subscribe today on Apple Podcasts, Patreon, or by searching The Murder Diaries ad-free on Spotify. For $2.99 a month, you get to listen ad-free, and we added a special series called Journal Entries, where you can get to know me and Natalie a little bit better. Every subscription helps our podcast continue to work with families, victims, and keeps the Murder Diaries content coming. Once we get 500 subscribers, we'll be moving from 2 episodes a month of the Journal Entries series to 4. So get excited and subscribe today. We've had some things in the works for a while with the amazing one and only Season of Justice. If you don't already know what Season of Justice is, it's a nonprofit founded by Crime Junkie host Ashley Flowers. Season of Justice is dedicated to providing funding for investigative agencies and families to help solve cold cases and bring resolution to those impacted by unsolved violent crimes. We're so excited to introduce you to Season of Justice Program Coordinator Kendall Mills. Welcome to the pod, Kendall. It's so great to see you again.
Guys. Good to see y'all.
You too. We feel so lucky to have connected with you and built such an amazing rapport over the last several months. It's really feels like a fever dream because we have fangirled Season of Justice for so long.
So long. And now we get to chat with the people behind the scenes. And I'm looking forward to having our listeners hear all about what you do there.
So my name is Kendall. I am the program coordinator for Season of Justice. So I manage all of our grants that are in various stages, the application process, our grant programs, and we're a really small organization. So really just whatever needs to be worn that day, I will most likely wear it. So I've been with Season of Justice from the beginning, and it's been a wild 4 years.
Can you give us an idea of the role that Season of Justice has played in the many cases that has helped reach a solved status? Like, what's the process look like, and how does it vary between the different types of cases?
Sure. So we fund DNA testing that is not available through your publicly funded lab. So it's your state lab, local lab, county lab. They're wonderful crime labs. They are funded by tax dollars, and they're limited to a certain extent. Technology is rapidly advancing. Year over year, we're seeing advancements that, we wouldn't see 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And that's really what's solving cases. Unfortunately, it's extremely expensive for those, the new machines that are coming out, the new DNA kits that are the most sensitive, that are going to detect the smallest, 0.06 nanogram of DNA. All of that is extremely expensive and out of reach for most publicly funded labs, most agencies in general. And so Season of Justice exists to bridge that financial gap, to alleviate that burden from law enforcement when it comes to testing evidence in these cold cases. And so we raise money from generous people like yourselves, people like me who consume this content and who have a very strong sense of justice, who want to actually make a difference in these cases. And, it's the small donations that add up that we're able to fund these grants that pay for these tests and this analysis that needs to be done. And it's conducted by accredited private across the country. And then investigators receive the results that they need. So to date, we have assisted in funding over 200 cases, and that's led to 13 solves. And these, the average age of our solved cases is at least 30 years. We're talking in 1980s, 1970s. It's been really interesting and rewarding to see the impact. But I'd say I get to live vicariously through, our forensic scientists and our detectives that, apply. I pay their bills. We raise money so that we can pay these bills so that they can get these tests and conduct their investigations. And that's really, the primary role that Season of Justice plays, because otherwise that evidence would sit in the evidence locker. It would continue gathering dust. It would not, we wouldn't have these answers. Eventually, sure, county labs, public labs, they'd catch up, absolutely. But that's, 20 years, 10 years, 5 years. People pass away. People deserve answers. And family members specifically, they deserve answers. If we can connect those agencies to that testing and alleviate that financial burden so that these cases can get everything that needs to be done so that they can get solved. That's what we're here for.
And our listeners are actually going to have an opportunity to help Season of Justice continue to help these families because we're going to be working on a fundraiser together. So listeners, get excited.
You heard it here first.
You heard it here first. And we're very excited to be working on that fundraiser. So be looking at our social media. And by the time this comes out, we'll have probably any helpful links listed in the show notes and linked on our milkshake link on Instagram, all that good stuff. So be on the lookout so that you can help solve more than the 13 cases that they've already solved.
Something else that I've noticed that Season of Justice does is they put up billboards. I don't think that should be understated at all because that is an incredible milestone for a lot of these families that need the awareness for the cases. For example, I can think of one in particular, a family that we've worked with, Arlene Harbison, her uncle, Leon Laurelis, who we covered on the Murder Diaries along with Arlene. They've been a family that has worked with Season of Justice as well.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. I could talk about everything that we've done for hours. But yes, aside from our DNA testing, we also fund awareness campaigns for families. A lot of times that's because DNA testing isn't always a viable option. Either evidence isn't, available. Was left out in the elements, or the crime scene was outside, and DNA degrades. And so there's a lot of cases, especially back in 70s, 80s, where we didn't know what we know now, where we're going to have to rely on human intelligence for there to be any kind of forward movement in a case. And so in those instances, we will work with families to fund awareness campaigns. A lot of the cases that we work with, it does primarily look like billboards. That's the kind of standard bearer for getting in the most cost-effective way to reach a community of people. But we have also done direct mailers. We've done print ads in local newspapers. We have done materials for memorial events like banners, yard signs, things like that, all with the purpose or the goal of reaching people who may have information. We know that crime doesn't just happen without people knowing about it. There's no such thing as a perfect crime. Somebody somewhere knows something. So if we can reach them before it's too late or where they're at and give them the easiest way to share information, that's always our goal. And additionally, a lot of these cases aren't covered by the media when they happen. One sticks out that we recently did that's actually local to me, and I hadn't heard about it until I received the application. It was a missing person, Bianca Carrasco. She went missing in 2016, literally a block away from where one of my best friends lives and where I grew up.
We actually worked with her sister, Giovanna, and her best friend.
They're a perfect example of why, for us, why billboards and awareness campaigns are also so important. They're just as important as DNA testing in a lot of cases because, like I said, I lived here in 2016. I was frequenting the neighborhood to visit my friends and hang out when it happened. And I did not hear about it until earlier this year when we received an application. And that's wild. That's wild to me. We were able to find a billboard that was along one of our busy highways here in San Antonio for 4 weeks. Before the billboard, I could search Bianca Carrasco's name in Google and maybe a story showed up. Maybe a podcast showed up. Your podcast showed up. But beyond that, there was nothing. There was no report. There was no recent updates. And Giovanna's done a heck of a job. She's certainly a fierce advocate for her sister. And I'm very honored that we had a chance to work with her. And it's because of her and her tenacity that now when you Google Bianca Carrasco, so many stories pop up. She was on my local news for weeks before and after the billboard. And the billboard acted as a catalyst for that renewed attention. And that's really rewarding to see because that's exactly what we want to do. A lot of times it's not going to be the thing that directly solves a case, but it is going to plant the seed. It is going to get the ball rolling. It is going to get, now these stories live in perpetuity on the internet. We can share them. We have resources. There's more visibility. And with increased visibility, you increase your chances of actually getting actionable tips that can eventually lead to that case being solved. That's the most important thing that we can do. So.
Now, a word about our friends over at First Degree. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to be best friends with a murderer? Or to escape a kidnapping? Or to be the daughter of a serial killer? Every Wednesday, hosts of The First Degree, Jack Benek and Alexis Linkletter, dive into a new true crime story told through the eyes of someone intimately connected to the case itself. From the world's most infamous crimes to unbelievable cases you've never even heard of, they examine the ripple effects that one single moment can have on an infinite number of lives. Listen to The First Degree wherever you get your podcasts.
You bring up such a great point in that if her sister wasn't kind of putting the pedal to the metal to get that attention, it might look exactly like it did before. When you were mentioning like you could barely Google anything, but now that she's putting the pedal's been put to the metal, if you will, that it's getting out there. She's putting in the work, doing podcasts to get the attention out there. And for every case like that, there's probably hundreds and thousands that they're putting the pedal to the metal too, and it just isn't getting that attention.
Yeah.
So it really can be mind-blowing. And it's not things that they want to do. They don't want to go on a podcast and have to talk about it, but it's part of what needs to be done. And it's really unfortunate, but these updates that the public can receive to understand what's going on in the case and just the visibility that comes with all of that is so important to kind of launch these into a space where they can get solved, if you will, or land in an office like Season of Justice is.
It shows just how critical Season of Justice is to these cases. You're given an opportunity to these families that they may not have received otherwise. And that's why we support what you're doing with this organization.
I mean, you bring up a good point. Like, this is not something families want to do. And for every one, tenacious person like Giovanna, you have families that don't have the emotional capacity or strength. And that's not a dig at any of them. I don't think I could keep doing that day in, day out and reliving the most awful day in my life. If something ever happened to one of my siblings, I don't know. I admire the families that don't give up and that are always out there. But that takes a significant chunk of, like I said, emotional bandwidth. It takes a significant chunk of time. These are people that have their families of their own, and their entire lives have been consumed just trying to advocate for their loved one. And not everybody is in a position to be able to do that. And unfortunately, that means that there are quite a few cases where we don't hear anything about them, or we hear one story and they get lost in the media. And I think we know that there are other cultural reasons why some cases get highlighted versus others. And we're looking to change that. We do everything we can to prioritize cases in an equitable way that makes sure that we really do pay as much attention as we possibly can to the cases that are not widely known.
People literally quit their jobs to be able to, I'm going to use the word, work on and advocate for their loved ones' cases, and or become, quote, unemployable, which we have been told by people we have worked with or families that we have worked with that they have become unemployable, which is such an odd thing to think about. But I guess all of the social media attention and stuff like that can come with it, that it causes issues getting jobs, or again, they quit their job because of the time and the effort that it takes. It's a cluster of a lot of different things that go into it. And I can't imagine having to give up those resources because one of the people you love the most in the world is missing or was murdered. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I'm sure you see it all the time in the cases you work on.
Absolutely. I mean, these are, you have families that, like Giovanna, like Arlene, they take this, they run with it. It energizes them. And that's really a humbling thing to be a part of. And then you have families that their life ended that day and it's never going to be the same for them. And those are the ones where, I get choked up. Those are the ones where it's hard. It's extremely hard. It's rewarding to be able to support them, but it's hard because you see the ripple effects of this violence. They are victims just as much.
Yes.
And it's very clear.
They really, really are. And sometimes it's great to use the word like they are a survivor of that murder in a certain way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So last weekend, I went to this podcast festival in Denver and we had a bunch of panels. One of the panels was two survivors whose family and loved ones were either missing or murdered. And they got up to say, address the audience about what they were talking about on the impact of families with these crimes. And the thing that struck me the most was when they said, we don't want to be here. We have to be here. And I guess I knew that on some level that, of course, they don't want to be here, but they have to. And they wake up every day having to put one foot in front of the other. And this is part of that.
They have to wake up every day remembering what happened.
When we're talking about, and they're having to relive this moment as they're talking with me, it's a club I'm not a part of. And I know it's a club that literally none of them want to be a part of. And yet here they are. Yeah, they don't want to be here. They don't want to have to do this. When we get families that reach out that, their cases don't meet our criteria for cold case, a case that we take has to be at least 2 years old and has to be, classified as a homicide, classified as a suspicious missing persons. And when there are cases that, just happened, we're not able to step in and help. I don't want to help. I don't want them to need us. I don't want them to need us in 2 years. I don't want it to go that long for them.
Right.
I want them to get the justice that they deserve quickly. And so when they come to us, we're last resort for a lot of these families. They've tried everything. They've been waiting for decades. And to hold that space for them is something we do not take lightly, to have their trust, knowing that they have done this over and over and over again against their will, because they have to, because they're the only ones out there fighting for their loved ones. It's not something that is lost on us. And it is certainly not something that we take for granted at all. We treasure every single one of them and, just try to make it as easy of a process as possible for them.
And we're so glad that you guys are here and able to do that. You, a little bit ago, touched on the criteria for a case to be advocated for on behalf of Season of Justice. Can you go a little more in depth? Because you covered a couple, but I don't know if that was all of them.
Yeah, sure. So we do have a process. We are a grant program, and there are certain things that far exceed our resources. There are certain areas, that we're not best equipped to assist in. So we stay in our lane, and we've done a pretty good job of defining that lane for the last few years that we've been doing this program. But we're here for funding awareness campaigns. We work directly with the family, so it does need to come. Applications need to come from a family member. We don't cover. We're not a podcast. We're not investigators, which is I would love to be one. I'd be horrible at it, and y'all want the real professionals on that. So, we're not investigators, but, we do try to at least help connect people to resources as we can. And so, case needs to be at least 2 years old because investigations are so difficult and there are so many out there. We've got the number now is over 300,000 unsolved homicides in the country. And that's unsolved homicides. That's not including the suspicious deaths or, the unknowns. When you think about the scale, how many cases are out there, how many families need help. We really wanted to position ourselves to, serve them in the best way possible. Setting that criteria was difficult. We really want to help everybody, but it does need to be classified as a homicide. It does need to be classified as missing persons, long-term missing persons, at least 2 years old, to give law enforcement as much time as possible to exhaust any leads they have. And I know that seems like a really long time. I absolutely understand that. I think the realities of laboratory testing, of evidence testing, we're so used to seeing it on TV and things get solved in an hour. We're so used to, advancements. Well, things can happen quickly, but evidence testing takes time. There's limited resources in that aspect. And so, giving investigators as much time as possible to exhaust all of the resources they have before we come in and just reignite that campaign or that investigation as much as we possibly can. Again, I reach out to investigators and I will touch base with them. And my question to them is, hey, we're considering funding a billboard campaign in this case. Will a billboard campaign help or hurt your investigation? I'm proud to say 99.9% of the time, not one of them has objected to a billboard. Of course, it will help. Please, we need all the help that we can get. The only time it has ever happened is because the sheriff had just an arrest warrant for the suspect and was going to make arrangements to arrest them that week, and asked us not to put up a billboard because he didn't want to spook the suspect.
Yeah.
And we fully understood that. So 9 times out of 10, there's no objection to putting up a billboard. But we do our due diligence. We want to make sure, of course, that that anything we do does not negatively impact an investigation.
If you've heard about prescription GLP-1s, which truly who hasn't by now, you've probably heard that they're super effective or even seen someone's results. My own doctor and I had a quick conversation about them just because they're everywhere and I was curious about what's going on with them. And even she mentioned how effective they are. These things work. But here's the thing. It can be confusing how exactly one in need might get a GLP-1 prescription. They're also kind of expensive. This is where Ro comes in.
Ro gives you access to prescription compounded GLP-1s with the same weight loss ingredient as brand name GLP-1s at a fraction of the cost. Plus, they're in stock and you can get them in 1 to 4 days if you qualify. Ro members have support throughout the process, and if you're eligible for medication, patients have access to their provider on demand for any questions.
The coolest part is you can see if you qualify from your own home. There's no need to wait for an appointment or try and find your way around a new medical office.
Go to ro.co/murderdiaries. Memberships start at just $99 for your first month. Medication costs are separate. That's ro.co/murderdiaries.
Go to ro.co/safety for black box warning and full safety info. Compounded medication is not required to and does not receive FDA review or approval. Prescription only. In today's world, comparatively to decades ago, we have things such as DNA and just updated processes. Would you say, and I remember at the beginning of our conversation here today, we kind of mentioned that a lot of these are, 80s, 70s, 90s, 30, 50 years old. Would you say that the majority of applications that are coming in are those older cases, or is it still kind of an issue to get cases solved kind of maybe at the same rate, at least by the data from the applications with cases from today? Because of course, right now we're kind of talking about people trying to get in where the case isn't even 2 years old yet, where you have to kind of say, okay, I hope I don't have to see you in a couple of years, but let us know in 2 years.
On the DNA side, not so much, because family or investigators understand, we have criteria and they have plenty of cases that meet that criteria waiting for assistance, waiting to be solved. There have been a couple, I'd say when it comes to DNA cases, the majority of the applications are 70s, 80s, 90s, maybe early 2000s. We've had a couple, kind of around like 2010s. But when it comes to families, and this just speaks to the family's dedication and tenacity. They're trying everything. They're going to reach out to everyone, and I encourage them to do that. It never hurts to ask. The worst they can say is no or not right now. And always encourage families to reach out to other organizations to keep us in mind. But when it comes to families reaching out in their case not being at least 2 years old, it's just they're just trying everything that they possibly can, and that's exactly what I would recommend that they do, and not to stop. As much as it sounds like you're just repeating yourself over and over and over again. Down here in San Antonio, we call it pounding the rock. You pound the rock 100 times, but it's that 101st time that cracks it open and you got, the crystals inside of it. So you just keep going. And even now, I encourage families to reach out to me. If we can't help, I'll find somebody who can. I'll reach out to people. I'll connect you with other organizations that are doing similar work. Whatever we can do resource-wise, we try to do everything that we can for the families, even if it's not something we're going to be able to help with right now.
That makes sense. More of the today's age cases are reaching out because they are exhausting every resource they're coming across, as opposed to saying, hey, this case isn't getting solved and it's not getting solved quick enough. It's just more like, hey, I've got this going on. We want it solved ASAP, of course. But so we're reaching out. There's a difference in that respect between the older ones and ones that might be more recent.
Right. That's more so relevant with the DNA cases, simply because police departments have evidence testing budgets. They do, and they have crimes every day that have evidence that needs to be tested. And it's in those instances, it's the cases, the long-term cold cases that get pushed to the back burner and get passed over year after year after year because they're working with such a small budget and such an enormous caseload. I know here in San Antonio, I was lucky enough to do, we have a Citizens Police Academy where you can go for 12 weeks and just learn about different aspects and different departments and how they operate. And I'm nosy. So of course, I was like, this is free. Sign me up. We're going. And homicide was 1 week and got to talk to the homicide detective. And the questions that the class was asking were really interesting. But one thing that we learned is these detectives are getting assigned a homicide case every 1.5 days. They're getting a new case. We know that they're not solving the last homicide in 1.5 days. That's unless, there's literally they had the person right there or they had footage of it and they were able to easily arrest that person. But they're catching these cases so quickly and their caseload is so much that, unfortunately, that does mean other cases sit on the shelf and they shouldn't have to. And so, like I said, that the evidence testing budget for most departments goes to those recent cases, the cases that are happening now, the cases that as more time passes, we know it gets harder to solve a case. So the immediate need is there. And we're here. Hopefully we will be here for as long as possible to fill in the gap for those cases that are in the back, that are not getting the attention, that are not getting access to that testing and getting that second look. So when it comes to families though, please, to all of your families that reach out to anyone and everyone. The worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to say no, and that's okay. There will be other people. Keep going.
Mm-hmm. My mom always says, if you don't ask, then it's a definite no. But if you do ask...
Exactly.
Did our moms learn all the same sayings? Because I feel like they all say the same thing.
Yes.
Kendall, you did say that it has to be a family member to reach out as part of the criteria. And that's something that we've learned on the Murder Diaries as well. When a case is being requested, that if it's requested from a family member, then we usually proceed with it. But if it's a friend or a friend of a friend, it's normally not something that we pursue. So can you talk a little bit about why that is part of the criteria?
Absolutely. And I think this will resonate with y'all as well, as I'm sure that it's coming from the same vein. We're not going to put up a billboard with a victim's face on it without the immediate family knowing and approving that happening. That's traumatic. That's re-traumatizing a family. And they don't need that from us. They don't need that from anyone. We're lucky enough to have family members on our board who truly, who are part of this club that nobody wants to be a part of, and understand that we're working for the families. We're working for the ones seeking justice. Yeah, it's really just, it's the trauma part of it. We really don't want to jar anybody in that way. So when a family fills out the application, we welcome advocates that they've worked with. There's a space on their application to name your advocate and provide the contact info. And if that's, the point of contact that a family wants to assign, that's perfectly fine. We will absolutely do that. But at the end of the day, the family is aware that a billboard is happening or an awareness campaign is happening. And so it's not just out of the blue shock to them. We would never want to do that. That's, I think, in my head, that's extremely disrespectful to them. And we want to make sure, of course, that they have final say on what goes on a billboard as well.
We love a trauma-informed queen, so we get it.
And I think that these are things that when you get into the true crime space, you start to learn even more and more. It seems so common sense, but it isn't always. You don't think about how a family member might just want to get on TikTok and not see like a random person they've never talked to in their life talking about their loved ones. And I would say this is even more so with cases that are already solved, which, we have covered solved cases in the past. And it is something that as we became more trauma informed and as we became more informed in this industry as a whole, that might not really make sense unless the family member wants to, which there are plenty of family members that do want to sit and talk to us for 4 hours about their loved one. And we love it. And we've done it. So it is something that you do learn along the way. When it's not something you live and breathe every day, you don't always think about it. Like you would just think, oh, that's so great that, Season of Justice got that billboard up for them because their best friend was advocating for that. It's like, well, if the family didn't advocate for it, imagine the family just driving by that. It's a jump scare. Even if you are thankful, that would be a huge jump scare and
Right.
just not a thing that might be safe for their mental state. So it's definitely something you learn.
No, exactly. I 100% agree. And that's not, we get, just like I'm sure y'all do, we get a ton of just genuine concerned citizens who, are coming from a really good place.
Always.
And will, recommend cases, right?
Mhm.
And, in those instances, thank you so much. Like, thank you for caring. Thank you for caring about this case and caring. Here's our information to pass along to the family, or, something that we keep it on our radar. And if the family reaches out, that's one thing. But I'm really appreciative of people who care and who want to submit cases and get the word out. But it really does, it's a respect thing, and it's also just it's a trauma thing. We just want to make sure that it's harm reduction. We want to make sure that we're not inflicting any more harm on these families than has already been inflicted than what they deal with every day.
And I'm glad that you acknowledge that the intention behind those who may not be relatives to the victims, it always does come from a good place. And Paige and I both sense that every time we get an email with a request, but it is just one of those things that we've learned over the years and we're trying to put into practice as we, continue with the podcast.
Oh yeah, we've had a best friend reach out, and then when we connect with family, they were like, "Oh, no thank you because of XYZ." And it's like, oh, wow. Like, even when it's a best friend who may or may not be in contact with the family, you do have to consider that. And the family does need to come first in those respects. We're so excited to launch our journal entries series. You can listen ad-free to the journal entry series by joining our Patreon at patreon.com/themurderdiariespod or subscribing on Apple. If you're on Spotify, you can also search The Murder Diaries ad-free and listen there.
So you're probably wondering what journal entries are. And if you've ever had a bestie, you know that you can be on the phone with them forever. Or at least that's how Paige and I's relationship is. We can be on the phone with each other for 45 minutes and not even blink an eye. So that's what these journal entries are. They're going to be things we're reading, watching, and just shooting the shit with each other. That was kind of gross sounding, but... So join us. We can't wait to have you there.
For $2.99, you can join us ad-free. Again, head over to Patreon, search The Murder Diaries ad-free on Spotify, or subscribe on Apple. We'll see you there. Bye. Something else that I would love to know is there a moment in your career with Season of Justice that you are most proud of or that you would love our listeners to hear about?
Oh, that's tough. I'm proud of this is going to sound like such a generic answer because I'm proud of every day. Like the fact that we exist and the fact that we are funded by donors, by people like us who want to care or who want a way to proactively impact these investigations. And that's wild to me. The fact that we have this opportunity is wild to me. But I think getting the news of our first solve will stay with me. It was a taxi driver in 1980. Oh, I'm going to mess the date up. 1983 or 1989, and he was an immigrant. He had moved to Alaska to get for a better life, working as a cab driver. And some 19-year-old kid robbed him and ended his life that day. And it went decades not being solved. And through forensic genetic genealogy, they were able to find him. They confronted him. He confessed immediately. And he's in prison now. And I think that was a really big moment for me because it made what we're doing real.
Yeah.
And it put it right in front of my face that we are actually having an impact on these cases. That case would not have been solved without the generosity of the community. And every single solve that we get, as a result of testing that Season of Justice has funded, I think just hits me. Like, I still can't believe that this is something that we have an opportunity to do. And yeah, so I know it's not a specific answer, but it's truly like I wake up every day grateful that I have an opportunity to play a very small role in these decades-long investigations or in a family's decades-long fight for justice. It's a humbling experience.
I feel like that is totally specific, and what an achievement that is and was. And to think that there's been 12 more over the past, I think I heard 4 years, which makes sense with my memory serving me as well. That's incredible. That's a few each year that are happening that would not happen without Season of Justice, their mission, and the community that supports Season of Justice. It's incredible.
I mean, we still have cases in the testing process. There's still, so it's a process. The testing that Season of Justice funds averages about a year to a year and a half, sometimes 2 years to go from, start to finish. And that includes follow-up investigations and things like that. So there are still updates coming all the time, and one of the great things that, I love, and we didn't really mention this, but what I love about how Season of Justice is structured is the accountability factor. We're a direct to vendor grant program. So most traditional grant programs, you apply, you get, a lump sum, you have to submit reports back and forth of how you spent this money, et cetera, et cetera. Season of Justice pays the vendors directly. So whether it's a billboard or, a quote from a private lab, that's exactly what we pay. We don't disperse funds to agencies, to individuals. We pay for the work that has been completed in that case. That way we can ensure, exactly what we're funding is going to, exactly what its intended purpose was. And that we're able to confidently say we are truly funding the testing that is needed for the specific case. That's something to me that's a really big deal because not a lot of grant programs know that. And I understand, the climate, there is an element of distrust because it's an area that we don't know. It's also that we don't have access to. There's no transparency sometimes, and it can be hard. It can be hard, based on the past to have confidence that cases are getting worked on, and it's something that I take great pride in knowing and being able to confidently say that yes, every single dollar that we fund towards our grant programs and towards DNA testing and towards our billboards is going exactly to that.
That makes great sense because there's so many things that people don't think about that might be involved in getting those things paid for and things like that might be complicated to structure the way you guys have worked so hard to structure it in that way.
The transparency is also great for the community because, when you are donating money and say whether it's $25, $50, $1,000, it takes a long time to earn that type of money. And so it's nice to know where each of your dollars is going. And it's nice to know that it's going to what you donated it for.
Exactly. But that's important to me as a donor. Our donors deserve the exact same respect and information. And, we can't talk openly about the open cases that we fund for DNA testing, but I do show, in our annual reports that are on our website. And in general, we will talk about, what types of testing we funded. I have aggregate data that you can see, how many cases we've funded FGD for, how many cases we've funded, advanced DNA testing and analysis for. And so you can see exactly the types of testing, the kinds of cases, things like that. And it's just, that accountability is extremely important.
I think accountability right there is the actual word. When, you go to a grocery store or even sometimes, really a lot of different places, but where I see it a lot is the grocery store.
Or McDonald's. Hey, would you like to round up? No, I just bought an icy or a Diet Coke.
Right, or my Diet Coke, exactly. And a lot of times there's been, I'll use the word some controversy as to the formatting that goes into getting those donations to getting where it's supposed to get donated to, and how it can be better for you to say, donate yourself just because of the accountability. And they're a huge corporation using that for say a tax write-off or something when it's like, oh, I could just use my money and donate to something like Season of Justice on my own, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean,
And it's a
the
tax
tax
write-off.
benefits.
right. And then you get the tax write-off or benefit should you, be able to benefit from that. So there's that idea there of thinking about when you're donating to something, what is it? How is this funding formatted? And how exactly is my dollar getting there? And once it's there, what does it do? So like to go from, say, McDonald's or Vaughn's or Ralph's or, Piggly Wiggly to have that, how is that dollar going from there to there and then to whatever services that place is getting donated to, once it gets there. So definitely accountability is something to think about.
So you know what I'm hearing? I'm hearing all pros, no cons for Season of Justice. I'm loving this.
That is exactly what I'm hearing. So you guys, please be on the lookout for all of the things that we have going on for our fundraiser with Season of Justice. Kendall, I do have a quote from you that I would like to read, but do you have any other last words that you would rather end with today?
I want to say thank you. Thank you to you both, one, for just your support, for being willing to host fundraisers for us and for the time to talk about what we do. And to everybody listening, we could not do this without you. So I'm extremely grateful and I'm not going to get choked up.
This is why we love Kendall. Why we love her.
It's our honor. We love Kendall. We love Season of Justice. We admire.
It's not an interview if I don't cry.
I love it. And to bring some really poignant, very articulate quotes to end today, Kendall, you've said, it could be the most seemingly insignificant piece of information that allows those investigators to connect the dots and finally get the answers, solve the case. You might not think that red car was significant back then, or you may remember being in that parking lot that one time. Human provided detail can go a long way. And I think humanity goes along with the accountability that Season of Justice carries on. So again, it's just such an honor to participate in this fundraiser and to just have connected with you this year. It's been amazing.
Thank you guys so much. Natalie, Paige, y'all are amazing. And I'm extremely grateful. And that's not wrong. Any little bit of information that you might have, that if it feels off, it might be.
It probably is.
So don't think that, it's not important. There are channels to share that information. There are Crime Stoppers organizations across the country. Find your local Crime Stoppers, share that information because it might be what leads to solve a case. So
perfect place to end it. Thank you again for being here today, Kendall.
Thank you guys.
Make sure you follow us on all of our socials at the Murder Diaries Pod. And until then,
stay safe.
Bye.